Story from D.C. on this busy Wednesday. We'll see you back again tomorrow night in New York. Tucker's up next.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, the president has decided that the Republican Congress, during its final weeks in office, should fund a wall along our southern border with Mexico. That's not a new idea, obviously. Trump ran for office beginning 3 years ago on that very promise. Voters agreed with it. They elected him. Now he's demanding unequivocally that the wall finally get built. Now, at the same time, and this is not a coincidence, the American news media has identified the single most racist idea that anyone in the history of this country has ever come up with, and that is, of course, building a wall along our southern border with Mexico. Watch.
The president went to the heart of what I call his brown menace theory. These migrants, they're dirty people. They bring disease.
This border wall thing is about controlling the browning of America.
Donald Trump is fixated on the southern border, as he was the day that he announced this campaign. It is not about securing the borders. It is about xenophobic, racist, bigoted beliefs.
Well, so that couldn't be clear. Border walls are racist. We know that. Unlike border fences are not racist. They're much easier to climb over. And that's why Democrats have repeatedly voted to fund them. You could have lots of border fences and still wind up with 22 million illegal aliens living in your country. We have proved that conclusively over the years. Fences are the perfect solution if you're trying to pretend that you care about border security while simultaneously encouraging much of the third world to move here without permission. Fences are awesome for that. Yay, fences. But walls, well, as Nancy Pelosi has explained, walls are immoral. According to CNN, in fact, walls are nothing less than an attack on the human heart. Listen and learn.
And a wall won't solve it. All that he's doing is putting up walls around people's hearts.
And we are not a wall away from being better.
Don't waste billions of dollars of taxpayer money in order to build something that will not make our border more secure.
Yeah, and that's the other point they keep making. Walls don't work. They're totally ineffective, except in prisons and the Vatican and outside Barack Obama's house here in Washington and in almost every upper-income neighborhood in America where walls surround the front lawns of the homes where Hillary Clinton and Beto O'Rourke hold their fundraisers. But along international borders, walls are useless. A border wall would simply create a thriving new market in taller ladders. Jeb Bush used to say that all the time. Everyone in power agrees with him. They're nodding vigorously from their gated communities.
We need border security. The wall is a part of border security. You can't have very good border security without the wall.
That's simply not true.
Just
that is a political promise. Border security is a way to effectively honor our responsibility.
And the experts say you can do border security without a wall, which is wasteful and doesn't solve the problem.
It's wasteful. Walls won't solve the problem. All the experts agree on that. And they have briefed Chuck Schumer, and he's passing on the news to us. Okay, but before we accept Chuck Schumer's claim about walls as fact, just one simple question. What about Israel? Israel is our closest ally in the Middle East. It is the recipient of our largest foreign aid package by far. Pretty much everybody in Congress on both sides supports Israel, or claims to. Many of them are vocal about that support, including Chuck Schumer. And yet, here's the funny thing. Israel has plenty of walls, and not just the famous one that people pray at. Israel has border walls, some of them tall and foreboding and made of steel. Are Israel's walls immoral? Well, by Nancy Pelosi's standards, why wouldn't they be immoral? It's a pretty obvious question, so we've asked it repeatedly of Democrats on this show. And every single time we get the very same answer to the question. Israel's walls have nothing to do with immigration. They're defensive walls. They're designed to keep out terrorists and suicide bombers. There is no comparison to Israel's wall and anything that Donald Trump is proposing. It's apples and oranges. Well, it's a pretty effective talking point, and that's why every Democrat repeats it every time. But is it actually true? We got curious and decided to find out ourselves from a knowledgeable source in Israel. A short time ago, we spoke to David Rubin. He's the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel. He's the author of the book Trump and the Jews. We had a fascinating conversation. Listen. Mr. Rubin, thank you very much for joining us. There's a debate in the United States, as you're fully aware, over whether to erect a wall on our southern border to solve what is an immigration crisis. Israel has relevant experience with this exact topic. Will you explain what Israel did in response to its immigration crisis and the effect that the wall had on it?
Well, we certainly do have that experience, Tucker. Between 2010 and 2012, there were 55,000 illegal immigrants into Israel. Now, you have to understand, Israel is a tiny country, so 55,000 illegal immigrants in just a couple of years is a lot of illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
And most of them settled in southern Tel Aviv, which was already a working class or a little bit rundown area. The rapes and murders in southern Tel Aviv skyrocketed in those few years. The Israeli government, under pressure from the grassroots mainly, grassroots protests from the residents of South Tel Aviv and other towns that were being overrun by these illegal immigrants, the Israeli government made a decision that they were going to build a wall, a high-tech steel wall on the southern border, the border between Egypt and Israel. So it was built over the next few years. It was completed, almost completed by 2015. In 2016, the wall was up. 2016, there were 11 illegal immigrants who entered Israel. And then they raised the height of the wall an additional several feet. And in 2017, there was not one illegal immigrant that made it through the southern border into Israel. So
that is a remarkable story.
It works.
So was there
it's a story that's...
So I'm just wondering the political part of this. So the 55,000 illegal immigrants you're describing were from Africa, as I remember, Eritrea, Sudan, parts of Africa.
Correct.
Was there anybody in Israel who said, you're racist for trying to keep them out?
Well, there was some of that, yes. Some of the people on the left were going crazy and having protests, and they were complaining that it's a racist thing. But look, illegal immigration is illegal immigration. And I don't know if you know this, Tucker. I was born and raised in the United States. I've been living in Israel for 27 years. But the Jewish immigrants who came to America, and I wrote about this extensively in my book, Trump and the Jews, they came to America as legal immigrants. They came only to work hard and only to be full Americans. That was their goal. And so, I've heard people like Ocasio-Cortez from New York, the congresswoman, talking about how the immigrants, the migrants, are just like the asylum seekers, the Jewish immigrants who are seeking to escape the Nazis in World War II. It's an obscene comparison, and I've heard it too many times from the left. So, yes, there was some in the Israeli left who were complaining and who were even accusing the Israeli government of racism. But the fact is that now nobody's complaining. Everyone is happy that we don't have illegal immigration to Israel.
That's an amazing story. And I hope that a lot of people watch this segment. Mr. Rubin, thank you for telling us what happened and your experience there. It's remarkable.
You're welcome, Tucker. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Jason Nichols is a professor of African American Studies at the University of Maryland and a frequent guest on the show, we are proud to say. Professor, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker.
So you just heard that kind of amazing story. I didn't know that. Tel Aviv, 55,000 illegal immigrants living there. The working class residents of the town said, crime is going up, we're against this. Government of Israel builds a southern border wall, not to keep terrorists out, but to keep illegal aliens out. Mm-hmm. And no one in this country says anything. Is that immoral?
So I think there are lots of big differences between Israel and the United States. First of all, we know that crime has gone down in the United States steadily since 1991. Immigrants both legal and undocumented, commit fewer crimes than Americans like you and I.
I don't know. I don't think that number is true. But leaving that aside,
but that's absolutely.
I don't believe it is actually. I think immigrants in the country commit crimes at a higher proportion.
No, that's
Okay,
we can look that up.
Separate debate. Okay, I'll even grant you that you're right in that. But why is it? And by the way, I just want to be totally clear. I support Israel's right to protect its own borders. It's a country; it gets to do that if it wants. But why is it immoral when we do it here, according to the Democratic Party, but not immoral when our closest ally in the region does it?
Well, again, part of this is because of the motivation that Mr. Trump has brought into this discussion. Also, the fact that I think there were certain things that the mayor said that were inaccurate. If you look at at immigration to the United States in the early 20th century, whether it was Jews, Italians, right, other groups, crime actually did go up. They were blamed for everything. They were blamed, they brought Cosa Nostra. They were blamed for all of these kinds of things. But when we want to sanitize our historical memory,
that's right. I mean, history changes over time. And shut down immigration.
We say, oh, they were just here to work hard.
Well,
and I'm sure
it's all complicated. But what's not complicated is that our closest ally in the region, our biggest recipient of American aid, built this wall, and the same people who supported building that wall, I'm one of them who supported it, are now telling us that an effort to protect our southern border in exactly the same way is, quote, immoral and racist. And I'm just wondering, what is the standard?
Well, when you're going around and you're saying that the people from our South are rapists and that they commit crimes when you actually don't have any empirical evidence to back it up, it sounds pretty much like it's xenophobic
so
and racist.
You don't like Trump. Which
it's not about
totally
Trump.
Fine, but how about
I have no feelings about Trump.
How about just taking Trump out of it? His motives, what he says. A lot of people would like a wall on our border, and they're confused because they hear Pelosi and Schumer say, "Well, a fence is fine, but a wall is immoral." What is the distinction exactly?
Well, I think again that the fence is not, even a fence is not necessarily what is going to lead to border security. And I think you and I actually agree. I read your book, which is actually a fabulous book. But
thank you.
I will tell you, when I read your book, the problems that exist with immigration, and I think Mike Pence actually has it correct, actually start in Central America. It's not at our border. So if we want to solve this problem, and if we're trying to stop, the things that the right talks about, the flow of drugs,
right.
One of the things that many experts say is that a wall or fence or any of that is not going to stop that. They're going to fly drones. They're going to find other ways.
Then why did it work in Israel? I mean,
we need to help.
We need to help them get better. Those countries
within their borders, people oftentimes don't really want to be here. That's the other thing.
Well, so I guess, there are a couple of things, but I'll just focus on one. So, lots of people have tried to make Honduras a better country, a lot of great Hondurans. But the country itself, beginning with the government, is dysfunctional, okay? That's why Hondurans and Guatemalans want to move here. So what would be the plan for fixing those countries to the point where they would have such a high standard of living and be so peaceful that people wouldn't want to leave? Is there a formula that none of us know? I
think, the reason that it's dysfunctional, and again, having read your book, is U.S. intervention that happened throughout the late 70s and early 80s.
So you're saying that Guatemala and Honduras weren't dysfunctional before the United States for reasons that are unclear?
I would say that the thing that brought people to our borders and that has caused both documented and undocumented immigration, that has driven that, has been the wars that we have created that have cost thousands upon thousands of lives.
Well, we didn't. I'm against most foreign intervention, including there. I agree with you there. But we didn't create those wars. Of course, we intervened in them because we thought it was in our interest.
We propped up the Contras.
We may have. We certainly did, but we didn't create the Sandinista Marxist revolution that enslaved the country of Nicaragua, of course. Well, but really quick, my question is. So what does that mean now? Does it mean that because we feel so bad about something that our leaders did 30 years ago, we have to pay the penance of illegal immigration? Does it mean we have an obligation to fix those countries? If so, how do we do that?
I think, investment and partnership with democratically elected leaders in those countries.
Where's that worked? Anywhere ever?
Has
that ever worked? Because we spend all this money abroad, and it seems to just make the countries more corrupt and the average person poorer and more desperate to come here. Has it ever worked?
Well, I think that there are certainly ways that we can do this where it would work. And we've always had the goal of colonizing a place when we actually try to help them. And I think the best bet is to go enter into partnerships with democratic.
So how about this one? Since we're in the reparations business, and boy, I'm open-minded about everything, as you know. But if we owe Latin America something, what if they flooded our communities with drugs and killed, 50,000, 70,000 people a year?
Wouldn't equal the amount of people we killed there.
I don't think that's right, actually. A year. So more people die of drug ODs in this country every year than died in all of Vietnam Americans over 11 years. So what do they owe us? Anything?
So again, we're going to disagree about.
I'm just wondering if it's a two-way street. I mean, can we collect for the fentanyl epidemic? It seems like we should.
Yeah, well, again, I think that the fentanyl epidemic has many different layers to it. It's not just coming from Central America.
No, it's a lot of it's coming from China, but a lot of it's moving through Mexico. So I'm just wondering, what does Mexico owe us for killing tens of thousands?
Well, again, we were talking about Central America. We were talking about Mexicans.
Sure.
Oh, they're all the same? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. We've learned recently that nobody dislikes Central Americans more than the people of Mexico. I actually like Central Americans. The average citizen in Tijuana does not feel that way, not as open-minded as I am, I would say that. Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tucker.
France, moving to the other side of the globe, facing some of the worst riots. Well, you've been told many times if you watch TV that America needs to join the Paris Climate Accord immediately. Pulling out of it was immoral. And to do your part to fight global climate change, you need to accept burdensome taxes on the energy you use. It's the least you can do. But what about the people claiming you need to do this? Are they willing to pay their share? Well, in a recent piece in the Daily Caller, ran in the Daily Caller News Foundation, reporters Chris White and Michael Bastash contacted 31 major corporations, foundations, and individuals who have endorsed the Paris Climate Accord. And they asked a very simple question. The simple ones are the most revealing. Here's what they asked. If climate change is indeed the existential threat you say it is, would you support a ban on all private jet travel? Now, these are deeply moral people, they asked. Obviously, you see them on television. They care in a way that you never will because you're too shallow. So are they willing to do this? No, not one of them. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg spent more than $1 million flying private over the past couple of years. His company didn't even bother to respond. Neither did Google or Apple or, by the way, Al Gore, who flies private all the time. In fact, only 2 of the 31 companies contacted responded at all. And both said they, buckle your seatbelt now, oppose banning private jets because they use them. You, meanwhile, are sinful for driving an SUV to pick up your kids at hockey practice, just so you know.
President Trump's former fixer and lawyer, Michael Cohen, is sentenced to 3 years in jail. The UK Prime Minister survives a vote of no confidence, but the agreement on a Brexit plan remains elusive. And we have brand new Fox News polls, plus an interview with Democratic Socialist, Vermont Senator, and potential 2020 contender, Bernie Sanders. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. The president's former lawyer is going to prison. Michael Cohen was sentenced to 3 years today for his role in orchestrating payments to alleged Trump mistresses, financial misdeeds, and lying to congressional investigators. An advisor to Cohen says President Trump's former political fixer will state publicly all he knows after Special Counsel Robert Mueller completes his investigation. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here with details tonight. Good evening, Catherine.
Thank you, Brett, and good evening. While the hearing was relatively short, lasting only 70 minutes, it was at tense and at times emotional.
Surrounded by friends and immediate family, the president's former personal attorney Michael Cohen entered the federal courthouse in New York City, receiving 3 years in prison for tax evasion, making false statements, and campaign finance violations. Cohen addressed the court and his relationship with Donald Trump, saying, quote, "My own weakness and loyalty to this man put me on a path to darkness, not light. I should have followed my inner voice." With his children in court, one daughter crying, Cohen said at one time he would take a bullet for his old boss, but he was no longer willing to cover up what he described as the president's dirty deeds. Federal investigators alleged campaign finance violations over admitted payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels and Playboy playmate Karen McDougal. President Trump denies having any affairs and has not been accused of any crimes related to the payments. The U.S. Attorney's Office said the National Enquirer's publisher, AMI, reached a non-prosecution agreement, admitting, quote, "It made the $150,000 $50,000 payment in concert with a candidate's presidential campaign to ensure the woman did not publicize damaging allegations before the 2016 presidential election. The woman is widely reported to be McDougal. On Capitol Hill, mixed reaction to Cohen's sentencing, which included 2 months for lying to Congress over a 2016 Trump-Moscow real estate project.
Anytime a former lawyer of yours goes to jail is probably not a good day, but I've yet to see any evidence coming from Mr. Cohen of collusion.
Pretty striking development and a moment for reflection for some of my Republican colleagues who have steadfastly insisted there's nothing to worry about here.
The president's former national security advisor, Mike Flynn, will be sentenced next week for lying to federal investigators. His legal team asked a D.C. judge Tuesday night for probation and 200 hours of community service. According to the filing, former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, who was later fired for cause, called Flynn at short notice in January 2017, sending 2 agents, including disgraced agent Peter Strzok, to interview Flynn about his conversations with the Russian ambassador. The filing states Flynn did not have a lawyer present, and the agents did not warn him that false statements during the interview could be prosecuted. By contrast, Flynn's lawyers said other Trump associates were advised of the serious nature of the probe.
Arguing for no jail time, Flynn's lawyers cited his military service and extensive special counsel cooperation, including 62 hours of meetings and the production of thousands of records. As for Cohen, he told the court today he will continue to work with the government. Brett.
Kevin, thank you. The president has yet to respond to seeing his former lawyer sentenced to 3 years in prison. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is on the North Lawn. Everyone there, John, kind of watching Twitter for a reaction. Good evening.
Yeah, and so far nothing today. Ahead of the Cohen sentencing, President Trump was all over the place, urging Judge Pauley to throw the book at him. But on the day that Cohen learned of his fate, from the White House, crickets. In his only public event today, signing an Opportunity Zone initiative, President Trump made no mention of Michael Cohen. Even on Twitter, he was oddly silent. The president's outside counsel, Rudy Giuliani, weighing in on the sentence, though, saying Cohen's claim of blind loyalty is laughable, considering Cohen secretly recorded President Trump talking about a payment to Karen McDougal, then leaked that tape to the media. And while Cohen and AMI both admitted the payments to McDougal and Stormy Daniels were meant to influence the election, Giuliani insisted they were private transactions and not a campaign expense. He's supposed to know what to do, the president said. That's what you rely on people for. That's what you pay lawyers for. President Trump did weigh in today on the terror attack in Strasbourg, pinning it to border security, tweeting, "Another very bad terror attack in France. We are going to strengthen our borders even more. Chuck and Nancy must give us the votes to get additional border security." The last time, Chuck, you shut it down.
No.
And then you opened it up very
20 times.
quickly.
After yesterday's contentious Oval Office battle over wall funding, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo used the Strasbourg attack, an apparent act of homegrown terror, to push for border security.
That's why, frankly, border security matters too. These are related issues in the sense of we need to know who's coming in and out of our country, so there are fewer people that the FBI and sheriff's offices in Kansas and places like that have to monitor and watch.
On China, President Trump said he may possibly intervene in the case of Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive arrested in Canada last week. The president telling Reuters, "If I think it's good for the country, if I think it's good for what will certainly be the largest trade deal ever made, I would certainly intervene if I thought it was necessary." The Secretary of State was asked on Fox and Friends this morning whether the president would go over the heads of law enforcement to save a trade deal.
We always have to balance American interest. Anytime there's a law enforcement engagement, we need to make sure we take foreign policy considerations into effect. It's totally appropriate to do so.
And tonight we can take one more list off of the possible list of names, or we can take one more name, rather, off the possible list of people to replace John Kelly as the chief of staff. North Carolina Congressman Mark Meadows. In a statement, the press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, saying, quote, "The president told him we need him in Congress so he can continue the great work he is doing there." The president insists, though, Brett, he's still got about 12 people who'd love the job.
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. According to the new Fox News polls out tonight, 46% of voters approve of the job President Trump is doing in office, 52% disapprove. That is a slight drop from January, but this approval figure has barely budged all year, staying within the narrow range of 43 to 47%. Looking ahead to 2020, 38% would vote to re-elect President Trump if the election were held today. That's all voters. When asked to forecast the election, 39% think President Trump will be reelected. 52% do not. Again, all voters. But 84% of 2016 Trump voters say they will definitely or probably vote to reelect the president. 10% say they will vote for someone else. Special counsel Robert Mueller, of course, all over the news. Those polled approve of the investigation by the special counsel by a 19-point margin, 56 to 37. Former Obama housing chief Julian Castro has taken a step on the road to 2020 by forming a presidential exploratory committee, which allows potential candidates to begin raising money. The Texas Democrat says he will announce a decision on January 12th. Castro says he has not spoken to former President Barack Obama about his potential candidacy, but plans on consulting Democratic leaders coming up, including Obama, and Castro is signaling that he's probably in. When House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi is not sparring with President Trump, she's trying to corral support from Democrats in the House. Correspondent Peter Ducey reports from Capitol Hill on her plans to try to limit the tenure of leadership.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nobody ever mustered up the courage to challenge Nancy Pelosi's climb to Speaker.
It was so inspiring to hear my colleagues place my name in nomination. Once again.
But if she wins, Pelosi won't be in the Speaker's lobby for long. She's trying to term limit herself as a way to win the support of incoming freshmen who won on a promise to pursue new leadership. Politico reports there could be a 3-term max for the top tier of leadership. Pelosi's office says, quote, there are various conversations going on about a path forward. Progress has been made, and the conversations are constructive because all involved care about the institution of the House of Representatives.
There's 40 new members, and they're looking out in the future, and they're going, I'll never be a chair. And it's probably the case because there are no term limits now.
But if Pelosi tries to shorten the length of the leadership tenure, she's going to get some pushback from the second highest ranking Democrat. Incoming House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer was asked, how do you feel about Ms. Pelosi trying to negotiate term limits? He said, she's not negotiating for me. Hoyer was asked, has she kept you apprised of her conversations? Hoyer said, no. Some newer members are siding with Pelosi.
You know, I'm the youngest person on the House leadership team right now for the Democrats, and I want to see more, young people, new people at the table, and I think term limits is one way to do that.
And even if this term limit truce falls apart,
60 votes,
but in the House,
and we don't have.
Pelosi is seen as being in prime position to be elected Speaker anyway.
She sealed the deal yesterday on live television when she was able to, skillfully show how effective she can be dealing with the very erratic, irrational president.
But some current Democratic lawmakers are telling Fox tonight that Pelosi's plan has no point because even if it shortens her time as Speaker a little, it still lets her stay on for now. And there are some Democratic members of Congress that want her gone now. Brett.
Peter, another effort up there on the Hill, the Senate taking some steps tonight to try to condemn Saudi Arabia after the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
Right now on the Senate floor, Brett, lawmakers are debating a measure that would punish Saudi Arabia by pulling American support for troops fighting in Yemen's civil war that are backed by Saudi Arabia. This resolution has been around since before Khashoggi was killed. It deals primarily with the War Powers Act, and it's bipartisan, sponsored by both Republican Mike Lee and independent Bernie Sanders. But Mitch McConnell is telling Republicans to vote no. He supports a separate measure co-sponsored by Republican Senator Bob Corker because he thinks that one does a better job of addressing the broader concerns about Saudi Arabia, blamed by U.S. intel agencies of being complicit or worse in the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Brett?
Peter, thank you. Joining me now is one of the co-sponsors of that Senate bill, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Why is this important?
It's enormously important. I think it's vital that everybody in America understand that what's going on in Yemen now, Brett, is the worst humanitarian disaster facing this planet. We're talking about in the last 3 years as a result of the Saudi-led intervention in the Yemen civil war. We're talking about 85,000 children already starved to death. We're talking about imminent starvation for millions more. We're talking about 10,000 cases of cholera breaking out every single week. We're talking about a generation of Yemen's children who will be stunted physically and intellectually because of the famine that is now existing. So we have got to end that. Furthermore, I think we have got to say to the Saudi government, which is a despotic government, which allows no dissent, which treats women as third-class citizens, that we are not going to follow their military adventurism into Yemen. And the last point as to why it's so important, and people like Senator Mike Lee, conservatives have been making this point, and progressives, is that for decades, under Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, Republican Congresses, Democratic Congresses, the Congress of the United States has abdicated its constitutional responsibility over war making. It is not the president who has the responsibility under the Constitution to send our troops off to war. It is Congress. We have got to take it back.
And Senate Majority Leader McConnell mentioned the constitutional fight potentially with the executive branch over war powers that this may spark from his point of view. But I want to talk about President Trump last night with Reuters on the issue of Yemen. He said this, quote, "I'm much more open to Yemen because, frankly, I hate to see what's going on in Yemen, but it takes two to tango. I'd want to see Iran pull out of Yemen, too, and I think they will." I guess the question is, the Houthis in Yemen launched more than 200 Iranian-made missiles into Saudi Arabia. How would you propose to deal with that?
Look, the issue is not only getting U.S. out of the war led by Saudi Arabia, but we have got to do everything in our power, and we have the power to bring the Saudis and the Houthis together to end the incredible destruction which is taking place. No doubt about it. The Houthis are playing a very bad role in Yemen as well. But I think most experts will tell you that the bulk of the destruction has been caused by the Saudis. But bottom line is, we have got to end that war, not perpetuate it. And we have got to work with the rest of the world in providing humanitarian aid to the children of that country who are now starving to death.
Senator Sanders, here is the Secretary of State today on the murder of Khashoggi.
The Saudis have already paid the price. There are the folks who actually committed the murder we've held accountable. We will continue to do that. No one underestimates how horrible this murder was. But remember, Iran is running rampant throughout the Middle East. The death of any one individual is awful. The death of hundreds of thousands of people in Europe or the Middle East or the United States matters an awful lot. And President Trump is committed to protecting America.
So the question is, if this relationship falters, do you risk changing the national security outlook for the Middle East from a U.S. national security point of view?
No. Look, above and beyond the humanitarian disaster in Yemen right now, let me be very clear. We have been in Afghanistan for 17 years now, and I do not want to see the United States get sucked into a never-ending war, costing us, our brave men and women in the military, and trillions more dollars, get sucked into a Middle East war between, on one hand, Saudi Arabia, and the other hand, Iran. What we need to do is use our clout on Iran, on Saudi Arabia, to bring these people together to say, you know what, we're not spending trillions of dollars more. We're going to help bring peace to that entire region.
I want to talk about two more topics with you, Senator. And one is the president says if there's a shutdown and he's fighting for border security, he'll take that because he wants $5 billion to fund a wall. Do you think this can get done, number one? And number two, do you think the border security is important?
I think border security is enormously important, but I think building a wall is a very costly and inefficient way to do that. And I'm not alone. I mean, many experts think that given the kind of technology that we have today, we can protect our southern border without building the wall and spending $5 billion. Furthermore, Brett, I'm not quite sure. He may, but I'm not quite sure that he has the votes in the House to do that.
Yeah, but Senator, in 2013, you voted for a comprehensive immigration. That included $18 billion for a wall and border security. So you're saying the $5 billion is a non-starter?
Well, I'm saying that you have $5 billion as part of tens of billions more for a wall. What I'm saying right now, sometimes you vote for things that are part of a broad package. But if you're asking me, at a time when we have veterans sleeping out on the street, seniors not making it on $12,000 a year Social Security, that it's a good investment for the taxpayers of this country to build a wall? No, I don't think it's a good investment.
All right, I want to end with this. Your party, where do you think the energy is in your party? Is it towards your progressive side of the party, or do you think the party is in search of? MoveOn.org had a 2020 straw poll yesterday. The top five leading as a person, a candidate potentially, is Beto O'Rourke, and then Joe Biden, and then you. Move On obviously supported you throughout 2016 significantly. Are you concerned that the party is changing?
Do I think the party just won 40 seats in the House of Representatives and 7 governor's chairs? I think that it's not just the party. It's that conservatives, progressives understand there's something wrong when we have a dysfunctional healthcare system, that we should have health care for all, that we should raise the minimum wage to a living wage, that we should rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, that we should end the incredible greed of the pharmaceutical industry who are ripping us off every day by charging us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. That's not Democrats, that's not Republicans, that is what the American people want. And I am going to do my best to push an agenda that addresses those and many other issues.
Can a Texas congressman who lost his Senate bid win your party's nomination for president?
Well, I think it's a little bit premature. We got a little bit of time left before that.
When do we get your decision whether you're going to do it again?
Well, when you're going to take on Wall Street and you're going to take on the drug companies and take on the insurance companies, before I decide that I want to run, I got to make sure that there is that grassroots support, and that's what we're ascertaining. If there is, I'll run. If there isn't, I won't. But we're taking on big time some of the most powerful special interests in this country.
Senator Sanders, we appreciate your time. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Brett.
Up next, Brexit prompts a no confidence vote for the UK Prime Minister. She survived, so now what? Brexit continues to cause chaos in the United Kingdom as Theresa May, the Prime Minister, faced a no-confidence vote this afternoon. The Conservative leader survived, but that only solves one problem. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is following the rough road ahead before the March Brexit deadline.
UK Prime Minister Theresa May lives politically to fight another day. 48 members of Parliament from her own Conservative Party forced a vote of no confidence, which would have booted her out of the Prime Minister job as well as the party leadership. All to do with her handling of Britain's exit from the European Union, or Brexit. Some Conservatives thought the deal she'd worked out left the UK too close to the EU. In the end, 200 lawmakers voted to keep May in office, 117 to kick her out.
The result of the ballot held this evening is that the Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
Despite a third of her colleagues voting against her, the Prime Minister was pleased and determined.
So here is our renewed mission: delivering the Brexit that people voted for, bringing the country back together, and building a country that truly works for everyone.
She's not out of the woods. A vote on her Brexit plan had to be postponed until next month for lack of support on all sides.
The time for dithering and delay by this government is over. The Prime Minister has negotiated her deal. She's told us it's the best and only deal available. There can be no more excuses, no more running away.
In the meantime, May will look for any sweetener she can get from European leaders, including assurances a post-Brexit UK will have the distance from Brussels her members want.
Well, I've said for a while that people who don't like this deal need to think very carefully about what the alternatives are.
The clock is ticking. The deadline for leaving the EU is next March, and there are no assurances May will wrap it up by then, which could lead to a calamitous no-deal Brexit or even a second referendum on the EU. Tonight's vote does mean that Theresa May is safe in her prime minister job for another year. She's also reportedly promised that she would not seek another term in office after this one ends, which is in 2022, and that is a lifetime in anyone's politics. Brett.
Greg Palcott live in London. Greg, thanks. Up next, the battle between the U.S. and China is not just about trade. We'll explain. First, beyond our borders tonight, hundreds of French police and soldiers are searching for the man identified as the suspected shooter who killed 2 people and left another 2 brain dead near a Christmas market in Strasbourg on Tuesday. The French consider that attacker an Islamic extremist, as the French ambassador told me here on set last night. Police have detained the suspect's parents and 2 brothers who are also known for Islamic radicalism. Turkey plans to launch a new military operation against U.S.-backed Kurdish fighters in Syria within a few days. U.S. troops are deployed with Kurdish fighters in parts of Syria, in part to prevent clashes with Turkey. The Turkish president says the target is not the American soldiers, but what they call terror organizations. Dozens of North and South Korean soldiers traveled through the demilitarized zone together today to inspect the sites of their rivals' frontline guard posts to verify they'd been removed. Soldiers from the 2 Koreas exchanged